Have you ever trusted someone so completely, only to discover they were living a lie? For 5 years I thought I had the perfect marriage, a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a future full of promise. But one ordinary morning, a single text message shattered everything. What started as a suspicion of infidelity quickly spiraled into something far darker, a web of lies, betrayal, and danger that I never could have imagined. This is the story of how I uncovered my husband's double life and the price I paid to expose the truth. The text message glared at me from my husband's phone, making my heart stop. "Last night was incredible. Missing you already." My hands trembled as I read it again, though I'd already memorized every word. 5 years of marriage, and this was how I discovered Nathan's true colors. "I'm Emily, and this is how my perfectly constructed life fell apart on an ordinary Wednesday morning." "You're being ridiculous, honey," my mother Margaret's voice crackled through my phone speaker. "Nathan would never cheat on you. He's such a wonderful provider, and he adores you. Think about how much he's done for this family." I paced the kitchen of our suburban home, my bare feet cold against the tile floor. The stack of papers I needed to grade for my high school English class lay forgotten on the counter. "Mom, I saw the messages. They're from his coworker, Vanessa. They're hotel receipts in his email." My voice cracked with desperation. "Maybe it's for work. You know how many business meetings he has?" The dismissal in her voice made my stomach churn. "Business meetings don't include heart emojis and lingerie photos, Mom." "At least stop. You're embarrassing yourself. What will people think? The principal's wife making such accusations?" I hung up and slumped against the counter, fighting back tears. My own mother, choosing appearances over truth. Again. The front door clicked open, and Nathan's whistling filled the hallway. I quickly wiped my eyes and straightened up. "Morning, beautiful." He strolled in, perfect in his designer suit, his CEO confidence radiating from every pore. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." I watched his face carefully. "How was your late meeting last night?" His smile didn't waver. "Productive. We finally closed the Anderson deal." "Really? At the Marriott downtown?" The briefest flicker crossed his face before he recovered. "What are you talking about?" I held up his phone. "You left this on the counter this morning. Forgot to lock it." The color drained from his face. "You went through my phone?" "Don't you dare make this about privacy, Nathan. How long have you been sleeping with Vanessa?" He ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, switching tactics. "Baby, it's not what you think. She's just—" "Don't." My voice shook. "Don't lie to me anymore." The doorbell rang, making us both jump. My father Richard's booming voice called out, "Emily? Nathan?" Nathan's expression shifted to something calculating. "We should talk about this later," he whispered urgently. But it was too late. My world was already crumbling, and I had no idea just how deep the betrayal went. I barely had time to respond before my father, Richard, walked into the kitchen, his presence as commanding as ever. A retired police officer, he had a way of making everyone in the room feel small. "Margaret called me," he said, his voice gruff. "She said you're having some kind of meltdown. What's going on?" "Dad, I started, but Nathan cut me off smoothly." "Emily's just tired," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I flinched away, but he didn't seem to notice. "She found some work emails and jumped to conclusions." My father's face hardened as he turned to me. "Is this true, Emily? Are you causing trouble again?" "Again?" I stared at him, incredulous. "When have I ever—" "Remember that boy in high school? What was his name? Tommy something. You accused him of cheating on you, and it turned out he was planning your birthday party." "I was 16, I snapped. "This is completely different." "Sweetheart," Nathan's voice dripped with concern. "Maybe you should lie down. You're not thinking clearly." I watched in horror as my father nodded sympathetically. "Listen to your husband, Emily. He only wants what's best for you." My phone buzzed on the counter, breaking the tension. A text from Rachel, my best friend. Got your message. I'm outside. Need backup? I grabbed my purse. I need some air. Emily, my father's warning tone stopped me at the door. Don't do anything rash. Think about the family. I turned back, meeting Nathan's smug expression. Oh, I am thinking about family. And I'm thinking about how easily they can betray you. I slammed the door behind me and practically ran to Rachel's car. As I slid into the passenger seat, she took one look at my face and pulled away from the curb. Your mom called me, Rachel said, glancing at me. Tried to convince me to talk some sense into you. I laughed bitterly. Of course she did. Heaven forbid their perfect son-in-law's reputation gets tarnished. What's the plan? Rachel asked, her tone serious. I pulled out my phone, opening the screenshots I'd taken of Nathan's messages. First, we're going to the bank. There's something weird about these messages. Vanessa mentioned an account being ready. I need to know what they're hiding. And then? Rachel asked, her eyes narrowing. I thought about Nathan's smug face, my father's dismissal, my mother's denial. Then we're going to burn their perfect little world to the ground. Rachel grinned. Now that's a plan I can get behind. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Nathan watching from the window, phone pressed to his ear. Let him scramble, let him worry. Because what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that his text messages to Vanessa weren't the only things I'd found on his phone that morning. There was something much darker hiding in his email drafts, something that would make his affair look like a minor indiscretion in comparison. The bank teller frowned at her screen. I'm sorry, but I don't see any joint accounts with that number. It has to be there, I insisted, showing her the screenshot from Nathan's phone. Could you check again? She shook her head. The only accounts I see are your personal checking and the joint household account. Rachel squeezed my arm. Try his name alone. I'm sorry, the teller said, but I can't access accounts where you're not listed as an owner. Walking out of the third bank that morning, I kicked a trash can in frustration. Dead end again. Not necessarily, Rachel said, pulling me toward a coffee shop. Your brother-in-law Adam works in finance, right? Maybe he knows something. I stopped short. That's actually brilliant. 20 minutes later, we sat across from Adam in his sleek downtown office. He looked like a more casual version of Nathan, same sharp features, but with kinder eyes and a slightly rumpled shirt. Emily, this is a surprise, he said, hugging me warmly. Everything okay? Nathan mentioned you were upset this morning. Did he mention why? I asked, my voice tight. Adam shifted uncomfortably. He said you weren't feeling well, might be making some accusations. Show him, Rachel nudged me. I handed over my phone. Adam's face darkened as he scrolled through the messages. That son of a... He stopped himself, taking a deep breath. I'm so sorry, Emily. I need your help, Adam, I said. There's something weird about their messages. They keep referencing an account, but I can't find it at any local banks. He frowned. Could be offshore. He trailed off, looking troubled. What? I pressed. Last month, Nathan asked me about setting up a shell corporation. Said it was for a client. I gave him some basic information, including a contact in the Cayman Islands. My heart raced. Did he use it? I don't know. Adam said, typing something into his computer. Hold on. Last week, he had me sign some paperwork as a witness. Said it was routine business stuff, but he seemed nervous. Do you have copies? Rachel asked. No, but I remember the company name, Silver Horizon LLC. I wrote it down with shaking hands. Adam, I need one more favor. Don't tell Nathan about this conversation. He looked between me and the messages again. Count on it. And Emily, whatever he's involved in, be careful. Back in Rachel's car, my phone exploded with notifications. 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from my father, and a text from my brother Daniel. Mom's having a meltdown. What's going on? We should call Daniel, Rachel suggested. He's always had your back. I nodded, dialing his number. He answered immediately. Finally. Are you okay? Not really, I admitted. Can you meet us? Give me 30 minutes, he said. As I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. 30 minutes later, Rachel and I sat in a quiet corner of a diner, waiting for Daniel. My older brother had always been the calm, level-headed one in the family, the one who could see through the chaos and find clarity. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was him. When he arrived, his expression was already serious. He slid into the booth across from us, his dark hair slightly disheveled, a sign he'd been rushing. "All right, Emily," he said, leaning forward. "Tell me everything." I didn't hold back. I told him about the messages, the hotel receipts, the offshore accounts, and the Shell Corporation. I even told him about Adam's suspicions and the name Silver Horizon, LLC. As I spoke, Daniel's face grew darker, his jaw tightening. "I knew something was off with Nathan," he said finally. "Last month, at Dad's birthday dinner, I overheard him arguing with someone on the phone. He kept saying something about moving the timeline up. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now—" "There's more," I said, lowering my voice. "I found something in his email drafts. Messages to someone about cleaning money through real estate deals. Daniel, I think he's involved in something illegal." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Jesus, Emily, have you told Mom and Dad?" I shook my head. "They won't listen. They think I'm making everything up." "Classic Mom and Dad," Daniel muttered. "Remember when I tried to tell them about catching Dad's business partner embezzling? They didn't believe me until the FBI showed up." My phone buzzed on the table. Another call from Nathan. I declined it without hesitation. "What's your next move?" Daniel asked, his tone serious. "Silver Horizon LLC, I said. "If Nathan's hiding money, that's where we'll find it." Daniel pulled out his laptop. "Let me help. I know some people who—" He stopped mid-sentence, staring at his screen. "Emily, look at this." He turned the laptop around to show me a news article from 3 years ago. The headline read, "Local real estate developer found dead in apparent suicide." Below it was a photo of a man I didn't recognize, but the name made my blood run cold. "Oh, was the previous owner of Silver Horizon LLC?" Daniel said grimly. "The article says he was about to be indicted for money laundering. The company was sold shortly after his death. The sale date matches when Nathan first started his business trips," Rachel added, her voice sharp. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Nathan. "Coming home late tonight. Business dinner with Adam." I showed it to Daniel, who immediately pulled out his phone and called his wife. "Hey, is Adam home?" he asked. A pause. "He is? Thanks." He hung up, his face grim. "Adam's been homesick all day. Nathan's lying again." Before I could respond, Rachel's voice cut through the tension. "Look who just walked into the diner." Through the window, I saw Vanessa stepping out of her car, her face anxious as she answered her phone. She hadn't seen us yet. "Back door, now," Daniel hissed. We grabbed our things and slipped out the back, my heart pounding. As we ducked into the alley, I caught a glimpse of Vanessa pacing by the entrance, her voice sharp as she spoke into her phone. Whatever Nathan was involved in, she was deep in it too. Daniel's apartment felt like a war room. Laptops were open, papers were scattered across the dining table, and the air buzzed with tension. My head spun as memories crashed over me, every moment with Nathan taking on new meaning in light of what we'd discovered. "Remember when you first met Nathan?" Rachel asked, sorting through bank statements. I nodded. "The charity gala, 5 years ago. He seemed so genuine, so passionate about his real estate development projects. He talked about helping low-income communities. He said all the right things." "Huh, played the perfect part," Rachel muttered. "Look at this," Daniel interrupted, pointing at his screen. "Silver Horizon LLC has purchased 6 properties in the last 2 years, all cash deals." That's not unusual for real estate, I said. No, but this is, Daniel replied. Every property was condemned within months of purchase, then resold at massive profits to shell companies that disappeared. My phone lit up with a text from my mother. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of your behavior. Come home and apologize to Nathan. I threw the phone onto the couch, frustration boiling over. They'll never believe me, Emily. Rachel's voice was strange. When did Nathan take that trip to Miami last year? March, I think. Why? She held up a document. Because, according to this, he was in the Cayman Islands, meeting with someone named Marcus. The name hit me like a punch. Marcus? I whispered. Nathan mentioned that name in his sleep last week. He sounded scared. Daniel's printer whirred to life. Found something else, he said, pulling out a sheet of paper. The previous owner of Silver Horizon? His suicide note was typed. His wife insisted he never typed anything. Said he was old school. Wrote everything by hand. Jesus. Rachel whispered. A knock at the door made us all jump. Daniel checked the security camera and relaxed. It's just Adam. But when he opened the door, Adam wasn't alone. My father stood behind him, his face stormy. What the hell is this? Dad demanded, storming in. Some kind of conspiracy meeting? How did you know I was here? I asked, stunned. Tracked your phone, he said dismissively. Emily, this has gone far enough. You're embarrassing the family. Embarrassing the family? I stood up, anger burning through me. Nathan is cheating on me and possibly involved in criminal activity. But you're worried about embarrassment? Criminal activity? Adam looked pale. What are you talking about? Daniel quickly filled him in. With each detail, Adam's face grew more shocked. The Shell Corporation paperwork, Adam said slowly. There was something else. A list of offshore accounts. I thought it was weird, but Nathan said it was standard practice for high-end real estate deals. Dad, Daniel turned to him, his voice firm. You have to see this isn't normal. Dad's face reddened. All I see is my children trying to destroy a good man's reputation. Nathan has done nothing but provide for this family. He even helped me secure investors for my retirement fund. Something clicked. What investors, Dad? Through Silver Horizon, he said, his voice defensive. Nathan set it all up, guaranteed returns, tax-free offshore accounts. The room went silent. Daniel and I exchanged horrified looks. Dad, I said carefully, did you give Nathan money to invest? Of course I did, he said. Your mother and I both did, our entire retirement fund. My legs gave out and Rachel caught me before I hit the floor. How much? Daniel demanded. 2 million, Dad said, his voice wavering for the first time. Why? What's wrong? Before anyone could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, Emily, or the next suicide won't be faked. I showed it to Daniel, whose face hardened. Dad, sit down. There's something you need to see. The room was silent as Daniel pulled up the documents we'd uncovered on his laptop. My father sat stiffly at the dining table, his face pale as he stared at the evidence piling up against Nathan. Adam stood behind him, his hands gripping the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. Silver Horizon LLC isn't just a shell company, Daniel began, his voice steady but cold. It's a front for money laundering. Nathan's been funneling dirty money through real estate deals, flipping condemned properties to fake buyers and hiding the profits offshore. My father shook his head, his voice trembling. No, Nathan wouldn't do that. He's a good man. He's family. A family doesn't send threatening messages, I said, holding up my phone. Look at this, Dad. Someone just threatened me. They know we're on to them. Rachel leaned forward, her voice sharp. And if Nathan convinced you to invest your retirement fund, he's not just laundering money, he's stealing it. That money is gone, Richard. Oh, and my father whispered, his hands shaking. No, that can't be true. Nathan said it was safe. He said— He lied, Daniel interrupted, his tone harsh. Just like he's been lying to Emily. And now, because of him, you and Mom could lose everything. Adam finally spoke, his voice low and filled with guilt. I should have seen this coming. He asked me to witness those documents, but I didn't read them closely. I trusted him. That's what he does, I said bitterly. He makes you trust him, and then he uses it against you. My father buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. For the first time, I saw the cracks in his unshakable confidence. What do we do now? He asked, his voice barely audible. We go to the FBI, Daniel said firmly. We have enough evidence to open an investigation, but we need to act fast. If Nathan finds out we're on to him, he'll disappear and take everything with him. The next morning, Rachel and I sat in a sterile conference room at the local FBI field office. Daniel had made the call, and within hours we were meeting with two agents. Agent Carter, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, and Agent Ramirez, a younger man with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. You've brought us quite a lot to unpack, Agent Carter said, flipping through the stack of documents we'd provided. Emails, bank statements, property records. This is a solid start, but we'll need more to build a case. More? I asked, my voice rising. What more do you need? He's laundering money, threatening people, and cheating on me. Agent Ramirez held up a hand. We believe you, Ms. Harper, but to take this to court we need irrefutable evidence, something that ties Nathan directly to the illegal transactions. What about the offshore accounts? Rachel asked. Can't you trace the money? Beacon, Agent Carter said. But it'll take time, and if Nathan gets wind of this, he could move the money before we can freeze the accounts. Then we need to catch him in the act, Daniel said, his voice steady. He's meeting with someone tonight, a man named Marcus. We think it's related to Silver Horizon. Agent Carter's eyes narrowed. How do you know this? I hesitated, then showed her the threatening text I'd received. Whoever sent this knows what we're doing. They're trying to scare me off. Agent Ramirez studied the message. This is serious. If you're willing to cooperate, we can set up surveillance on the meeting. But it's risky. If Nathan or his associates suspect anything, it could get dangerous. I don't care, I said firmly. I want him stopped. That night, I sat in an unmarked van with Agent Ramirez, watching the warehouse through a pair of binoculars. The air was thick with tension, and my heart pounded in my chest. Rachel and Daniel were in another van nearby, while Agent Carter and her team prepared to move in. Nathan's car pulled up to the warehouse just after 9 p.m. He stepped out looking as calm and confident as ever, and was greeted by a tall man in a dark suit. Marcus. They exchanged a brief handshake before disappearing inside. That's our cue, Agent Ramirez said, speaking into his radio. Team Alpha, move in. The next few minutes were a blur. FBI agents swarmed the warehouse, their shouts echoing through the night. I watched from the van, my hands gripping the binoculars so tightly my knuckles ached. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and my heart stopped. What was that? I asked, panic rising in my voice. Stay here, Agent Ramirez ordered, jumping out of the van. I couldn't just sit there. Ignoring his instructions, I climbed out and ran toward the warehouse, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Inside, the scene was chaos. FBI agents were shouting orders, and Nathan was being dragged away in handcuffs, his face twisted in rage. You think you've won, he shouted at me as I entered. You have no idea what you've done. Shut him up, Agent Carter snapped, and an agent shoved Nathan into the back of a police car. I turned to see Marcus being restrained by two agents, his face bloodied but defiant. This isn't over, he growled. You're all dead. Agent Carter approached me, her expression grim. We've got them both, but this is just the beginning. Nathan's been laundering money for a much larger operation. This goes deeper than we thought. The next morning, the news broke. Local CEO arrested in money laundering sting. Nathan's face was plastered across every channel, his carefully crafted reputation in ruins. My phone buzzed nonstop with calls and messages, but I ignored them all. I couldn't deal with the world's judgment. Not yet. My parents came over that afternoon, their faces pale and drawn. My mother, for once, didn't have anything to say. My father sat down heavily at the kitchen table, his hands shaking as he held a cup of coffee. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I should have believed you. I should have protected you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to demand why he'd chosen Nathan over me, but another part of me saw the pain in his eyes and knew he was already punishing himself. "We'll get through this," I said quietly, "but it's going to take time." Rachel and Daniel arrived later, bringing food and a sense of normalcy. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Nathan was gone, and while the road ahead would be difficult, I knew I wasn't alone. The days following Nathan's arrest were a whirlwind of emotions. Relief, anger, sadness, and even guilt swirled inside me as I tried to process everything that had happened. The man I had loved, trusted, and built a life with had not only betrayed me, but had also put my family in financial and emotional ruin. Yet, for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally breathe. The fallout from Nathan's crimes hit hard. My parents, who had invested their entire retirement fund into his schemes, were devastated. My mother, Margaret, who had always been so quick to defend him, now couldn't even say his name without breaking into tears. "I don't know how we'll recover from this," she said one evening, sitting at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. "We trusted him, Emily. We trusted him with everything." I sat across from her, my own coffee growing cold in my hands. "I know, Mom. But we'll figure it out. We always do." My father, Richard, who had always been the strong, stoic one, looked older than I'd ever seen him. "I should have seen it," he muttered. "I should have protected you, protected all of us." "You couldn't have known," I said softly. "Nathan fooled all of us. He was good at it." Daniel, ever the problem solver, stepped in to help my parents sort through the financial mess Nathan had left behind. With Rachel's legal expertise, they were able to recover a small portion of the money through the FBI's asset seizure program, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. "We'll make it work," Daniel said one evening as we all sat together in my parents' living room. "It's going to take time, but we'll rebuild. As a family." For the first time in years, I felt a sense of unity with my family. The cracks that had formed over the years, the dismissals, the misunderstandings, the unspoken resentments, were slowly being mended. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As for me, I knew I couldn't stay in the house I had shared with Nathan. Every corner of it was a reminder of the lies, the betrayal, and the pain. With Rachel's help, I found a small apartment in the city, far enough away to start fresh, but close enough to stay connected to my family. Packing up my things was harder than I expected. I found old photos of Nathan and me, smiling and happy, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. But then I remembered the text messages, the lies and the threats, and the sadness was replaced with resolve. "This is your chance to start over," Rachel said as she helped me load boxes into her car. "You're stronger than you think, Emily." I nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "I just wish I'd seen it sooner." "You can't blame yourself," she said firmly. "Nathan was a master manipulator. But you stood up to him. You exposed the truth. That takes courage." In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild my life. I threw myself into my work as a high school teacher, finding solace in the routine and the joy of helping my students. I started therapy, which helped me process the trauma and begin to heal. And slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself again. One evening, as I was unpacking a box in my new apartment, I found a journal I had kept during the early years of my marriage. Flipping through the pages, I saw entries filled with hope, love, and dreams for the future. It was bittersweet to read, but it also reminded me of who I was before Nathan and who I could be again. I decided to share my story, not just with my family, but with others who might be going through something similar. I started a blog, writing about my experiences, the red flags I had missed, and the lessons I had learned. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. People from all over the world reached out, sharing their own stories of betrayal and resilience. One message stood out to me. "Thank you for sharing your story. It gave me the courage to leave my toxic relationship. You're stronger than you know." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a purpose beyond the pain. I wasn't just a victim of Nathan's lies, I was a survivor. My relationship with my parents also began to heal. My mother, who had always been so focused on appearances, started to open up about her own regrets and insecurities. "I was so afraid of what people would think," she admitted one evening. "I didn't want to believe that someone I trusted could be so evil." "It's okay, Mom," I said, taking her hand. "We all made mistakes, but we're still here. We're still a family." My father, too, softened in ways I hadn't expected. He started joining me for coffee on Sunday mornings, something we hadn't done since I was a teenager. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for," he said one morning, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud of you, Emily." Hearing those words meant more to me than I could express. Nathan's trial was a media circus, but I chose not to attend. I didn't need to see him again to know that justice was being served. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison for money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy. Marcus, his accomplice, received an even harsher sentence. The chapter of my life with Nathan was finally closed. As I stood on the balcony of my new apartment one evening, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. My life wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges ahead, but I knew I could face them. I had my family, my friends, and most importantly, myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt free.